guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we are going to be building a healthcare dashboard. Now, if you've been following my tutorial for quite a while, you will find out that we have never worked on any health related projects before. But in this tutorial, we are going to be building a healthcare dashboard. A brief introduction into what this dashboard is actually all about. Now, this is a PCOS dashboard. Now, what is PCOS? PCOS means polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, PCOS is a condition that affects 45% of women across the world. It is a fertility condition that makes it challenging for women to actually get pregnant easily. Now, I'm not saying that women with this condition cannot get pregnant, but women with this condition find it challenging to get pregnant compared to women without this condition. Now, in this project, we are going to be looking at a lot of things. We are going to be looking at factors that actually contribute to successful pregnancy journey for women with this condition. We are going to be calculating a lot of KPIs, and we are going to be explaining a lot of medical terminology. However, before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much, 1000 plus YouTube family. Enough of the talking now, let's get started. So this is the project we are going to be working on. Like I mentioned in the introduction of this tutorial, this is a health dashboard, right? So it's a health data that we are going to be working on. If you've been following my YouTube channel, you will notice that we have not really worked on any health related data before. So this is actually going to be our very first project that is health related. Now, before we move ahead, I want to say thank you so much for 1000 plus subscribers. Thank you so much for 1000 plus family. I wouldn't have been here without you guys. Thank you so much for your likes, your comments, your subscription. Without you, this journey wouldn't have been possible. And again, if you're seeing my tutorial for the first time, or if you haven't actually subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you're not following me on LinkedIn, please do well to subscribe to my YouTube channel and actually click this link to follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. Now let's move ahead. If you've been following my tutorial, one thing you will notice is I try to make each tutorial as beginner friendly as possible. However, this particular tutorial is going to be a very fast-paced tutorial, so I do not actually recommend it for a total Power BI beginner. However, if you're actually looking for a beginner-friendly tutorial on Power BI, I have a lot of tutorials here. Like this particular tutorial is actually beginner friendly. I have this tutorial also that is beginner friendly. I have this tutorial that is beginner friendly. Then I have this tutorial that is beginner friendly for data modeling. Then I also have this, okay. So I also have this tutorial that is beginner friendly. And I also have this tutorial and this tutorial. They are all beginner friendly. So if you're looking for a beginner friendly tutorial, so you can actually start with any of these. Now let's move ahead. The first thing we have to do is open up our Power BI dashboard, which I already have open there. So we just go over to get our data because we are working with a CSV file. We go over to click on CSV. Then this is the data we are going to be working with called the PCOS data. Like I mentioned during the introduction of this tutorial, PCOS means polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now let's move ahead. So this is actually a preview of our data. So what we have to do is go over to our Power Query to see if there are any data cleaning that we need performed. So this is our Power Query editor. So the first thing I want us to do is I want us to go over here and drop this particular column because we won't actually be using it for any analysis. Then the next thing I want us to do is let's go ahead and actually go through this data thoroughly. So this is the file number. So as you can see, we have 100% data valid and 0% error. So let's move ahead. So this is the age. So we have 100% valid. Now let's look at what the age looks like. Okay. So we can go over and continue with that. So this is the weights. So let's go over and see what this looks like. Okay. So we can just cancel and continue. Then the height, let's see what this looks like. So the body mass index, BMI. So we can put that. So the blood group also. Then we have the pulse rates, right? So we also have the arrow breadth and HB. Then when you look at this particular place, you see we have 44 columns and 541 rows. Okay, so let's just keep going. So over here, you see we have an empty data, right? We have an empty row, which is this. So I can just decide to remove that empty row entirely, right? You can decide to remove this empty row entirely or just fill them with zero. So I would recommend we just go over to say replace values. So replace values and I just fill null with zero. So we say we are filling null with zero. Then we go ahead and OK this. All right. Now that has been handled. So when we go over here, let's see. Now when you go over here, you see we have 0, 1, right? So this simply means that this particular column was encoded where 0 stands for no and 1 stands for yes. Now let's move ahead. So this is number of abortions, like if any of the ladies have actually had abortion. So 0 means no abortion, 1, 2, 3. So yes. So let's move ahead. So over here, HCC, HCG. So okay. So I'm not in the medical field, so some of these columns I don't really know what they mean. So let's move ahead. Okay. So this is FSH. I think this is one of the fertility hormones, LH. Okay. So we are just more interested in the accuracy and validity of the data. Now, when you look at this column, we see that you have 1% error. So let's just go ahead and just replace our error with, we can decide to, now when you look at this column, you actually see that we have error, like a 1% error, right? Now we can actually go ahead and remove the errors, or we can simply go ahead and replace them with null. Okay, so whichever works. So I will just like to replace this with, sorry, we are not replacing values, we are replacing errors. Replace errors. So I will just want us to replace it with null. Okay, now that works. So let's move ahead. So this looks okay. All right, this looks okay. Now this looks okay. Okay. And as we are actually walking through, we are actually checking for, to be sure that the data type is actually correct. Okay. So most of these columns are actually encoded. So that's one thing you need to understand, they're encoded. Okay, so let's just move ahead. Okay, too many columns. Now, as you can see this, we actually have 99% empty. Okay, so I just want us to go over and just remove this column. Okay, then this looks good. Let's see. Okay, follicle. So follicle left, follicle right. I think this has to do with the ovaries. How many number of follicles are in the left and the right ovaries? So the BP, okay, cystostic and diastolic. So regular exercise, yes, no, encoded. Fast food, okay, 99% valid. I think this was the one we worked on with arrow. So I think that's okay. Alright, so skin darkening, hair growth, weight gain, and okay, too many columns here. So HCA pregnancy. So I think that is all we actually need to do for here. So I can see that most of the columns are actually in their right data type. So they're actually in the right data type. So they're in the right data type. Okay. So what we need to do is we can just go ahead and close and apply. So our data has actually loaded up. So now we can go ahead to start working on our dashboard. So the first thing I want us to do is to build the structure of our dashboard, right? So this is what our dashboard will look like. So we just have to go ahead and build the structure. Then we can go ahead to start calculating our KPIs. Then I think that's all. So I think this will be a pretty fast project. So the first thing we are going to be doing is adding a shape. So we go over here and pick our rectangle. Then we can just make this smaller. Then move this to the extreme. Then let's move this down. Then we can just make this bigger, right? Make it bigger. Then we can simply come over here to reshape it. So we go back to style. Then we change this to pink. Then we can turn off this, sorry, we can simply turn off the borderline. Now, the next thing we have to do is let's go over to what we have next. So the next thing we have to do is let's achieve this over here, then achieve this over here. So let's go back to our Power BI, then let's pick our shape. So let's insert our shape. Okay, so let's make it a line, right? So we can just make this smaller this way. Then let's move it here and let's move it here. Okay, so we can simply turn this to white. So we go over here and say we want you to be white here. No, white, please. We are trying to turn this to white. So we'll go over to style and we said yes, white. So let's go over to shape. I don't know why that is not turning to white. We'll go over to effects, then go over to style border. So the border we can just make it white. Okay. Then we can simply come over here, copy and paste this, then we move it up. Okay, we move it up. Then let's go back. Okay, let's go back. Now this is what we have. Okay, this is looking fair. Now the next thing we have to do is achieve this text here, the welcome back pressures. So let's go over to our Power BI and let's pick our text tool. And let's say move it up here and let's make it a bit bigger. Then we say welcome back precious. Okay, then we go over to highlight this and let's make it of Canberra. Then we can make this 24, make it a bit bigger. Okay, now that was quite small, so make it a bit bigger and bold this. Okay, so this says welcome back precious. Okay, then we can simply make sure that this is this way. Then we can move this down. So we can take this up and let's move this down right here. Right? Now this is looking more like it's okay. So let's just go over here and eliminate this. Right? Now let's go back to our dashboard and see what's happening there. Okay, so that should be a pink. Okay. That should be a pink. So we can just go over to say Control A, then I want to turn this to pink. So we come over here and say, okay, that should give me pink. Okay, looks good. Now let's go over here. Okay. Then the next thing we can do is, since we have a pink here, so the next thing we can do is, as you can see, there was a borderline or the header icon. No, sorry, that's not what I was looking for. Okay, no, that wasn't what I was looking for. So let me off this. So let's go back to properties and okay. So title, effects. Okay, let's say visual border. Okay, yes, that looks good. Because that was what we were trying to achieve there. Now let's go back to that. I think the visual border should be white. So let's go over to say our visual border should be white, right? So visual border should be white. Okay. When it is pure white, then it disappears. So we can use something like an ash over there, right? So let's go over to say properties, or let's say effects, then visual border. Then let's say we want to use this for our visual border. Okay, makes sense. Now, the next thing we have to achieve is an overview of women living with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Then what we have to do again is pick our pencil and make it smaller. Okay. Then let's drag it over here. Then we say an overview of women living with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Okay, now let's go over to highlight this and let's turn it to Canberra. Okay, let's turn it to Canberra, and I think we need to make this bigger a bit. How does 16 look? Okay, I think 16 is looking just perfect, right? Don't you think so? Then, okay, I think we need to make this off. All right, an overview of women living with polycystic. Okay, looks good. So we can take this up a bit. Then let's see what we have here. Okay, I think that looks good if you ask me. So okay, so we can simply just make this come here and let's leave this at this for now. Then let's go over to see what else should we try to achieve. Now let's achieve what we have here. Okay. Then after that we achieve this, then we start achieving the shapes. Okay, we have here then the image. Now let's move ahead. So to do that, let's go over to pick our let's go over to say button. Okay. So I want us to have a blank button here. Okay. No, no, no. So let's go back to remove this. So we go back to pick our shape and let's come here, right? Now this is looking more like it's okay. So okay, let me just Control Z this. Okay, I think it's ended up pixelated. So I want to make this smaller, right? I want to make this smaller while holding my shift key to ensure that it doesn't lose its proportion. Okay, so I still want to make this smaller, 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 smaller. Now let's go over here to see what we have. So this is it, right? Now, okay, I know what I'm doing. So this is it. Okay, so let's move ahead. Now, what we have to do is let's go back to our Power BI and let's come over here. I want us to turn this shape to dark blue. So dark blue. Okay, this makes sense. Then I want us to make it smaller a bit. I want us to Control Z that and let's make it smaller. Let's make it smaller a bit. Okay, let's make it smaller a bit. Now we can actually pick up our text too. So we can simply come over here to Control Z, Control C and Control, sorry. I want us to come over here, right? Control C and Control V. Okay. So we can come over here and say overview, overview. Okay. So let's go over here and make it Canva for text consistency. We'll go over another Canva. Then we can make it tall, right? Then we can come over here and I want us to take that to the middle, highlight, and let's take it to the center. Okay. So we can come over here to make this a bit smaller. So let's come over here. Now, the next thing I want us to do, I want us to go over here and, okay, no, let's move this here first before turning it to white so it doesn't disappear. Okay, now we have that background right there. So we need to eliminate that. Now to eliminate that, we go over to say properties. Let's go over to effects and we are turning up the background. Okay. Then we can go over to say we want to turn this to white. So I have to highlight it before we can turn it to white. So we are turning this to white, right? Okay, looks good. Now, the next thing we can do is I can decide to make this smaller, right? Okay. Then I can decide to make this way. Okay. Now, that is that for that. So I can decide to say we are eliminating this. Why does it keep popping up? Now I can decide to say I want this to look better. So what do I want to do? I actually want to go to my home, right? And I'm trying to look for a tool. So no, not this. So let me go to format instead. Okay, yes, I was trying to look for this align. So I want to align to middle. Okay, align to center, right? So this is kind of not working the way I want it to. I think because of the extra spaces down there, but okay, let's just leave it at this. Now let's go ahead. The next thing we have to achieve is pick up six factors, clinical insights. So those are just metrics. So we can simply come over here to copy paste. Then we come down here and say we say PCOS risk factors, right? Then we can come over here and make this smaller. Okay. Then we can also come here, copy and paste. Then we can say clinical insights, right? Clinical insights, right? Now we can come over here and move this here. Okay. Now you can see that white background. So we just turn off this. Then we can come over here and Canva, okay, looks good. So let's make this 12 and see. Okay, I think it looks good, right? 12 is looking perfect to me. I don't know about you though. So, okay, now let's do something. Can we centralize this, please? Can we centralize this? Okay, yeah, that has been done already. So can we now move this here? Okay, looks good. Looks good. Now let's go over to here. Let's see something is actually happening right there, right? I think there's something we need to do that we are not doing. So I think we should just move this here, right? Probably we should make this smaller. So instead of 26, how does 24 look? Now 24 looks good. So we can simply make this smaller. Then over here, instead of 16, how does 14 look, right? Looks good, right? Then we can simply come here and say, okay, we are taking this down and I want to make this smaller, right? Then I want to make this come here. So just making sure that the whole user interface looks cool. Then over here, we can simply say, I want us to group this together. So we can instantly just move them around. Okay. So we can simply just click on this now and move them around and over here. Okay. So we have enough space to do that, right? Then we can simply then pick this and move this over here. Move it over here. Looks good. Okay. Now we can simply come over here. Let's see this. 12, right? We can simply come over here and make it 12 too. Okay. Then we can simply come over here. Then let's move this here. So let's also eliminate the white background so we don't actually have anything looking awkward. Then let's go over to our format and let's say we want to align all this to the middle so it doesn't actually look like it's all over the place, right? Then we can distribute horizontally and also distribute vertically. Looks good. Okay. Now we can decide to click on this tree. Okay. And let's group this so it doesn't go running over the place. So we can decide to just no. Control Z that, Control Z that. Okay. So let's try grouping that again. Okay, so we grouped that. All right. So we can decide to just move this here. Okay. Looks good. Now, let's move ahead. The next thing we have to achieve here is this, right? Now, let's see how we can make that happen. Okay. So we can simply move this here a bit, right? Move this here a bit, move this here a bit. Okay. Now the next thing we have to achieve is the Precious Benjamin Healthcare Analyst. Okay, so we can simply go over to say text box. And what am I trying to achieve? I'm trying to achieve the name. Okay, Precious Benjamin. Precious Benjamin. Okay, so we can simply turn this to Canva, and let me turn this to 14. And I want to bold this. Cool, cool. Then we can simply make this smaller, right? So let's make this smaller and see what it looks like. Looking good. I don't know, but I think it's looking a bit too big. So let's just make this 12 instead. What do you think? I think it looks good. Then we can go ahead and make this, let's move this here, right? So let's move this here. Okay. Now I want us to click on this. Let's copy this and paste it. Okay. We have something that's popping up. What's cool? Now I want us to say healthcare analysts, right? Healthcare analysts. Then I want us to simply make this 11. Okay. Now, when you look here, we have that white effects background on that, so we can also eliminate it here. So let's look the arrangement of this healthcare analyst. So we can simply make this smaller. Okay. So make this come over here, then we can simply move this here, right? Now, I think this is looking too far from each other. So you can simply go up. Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to achieve the image right there. So we just go and pull up the image. So what we have to do is go over to insert. So we go over to insert and let's insert the image. Now to pick up the image, let's go over to style and say we are looking to upload an image. So we browse it. So this was the image I used. So I just go over to click on it and say okay. Then I can simply go over to say general. I want to turn off background. Okay. I think background is already turned off. I think the white background actually came with the image. So I can decide to make this smaller, then push this over here. So we have successfully achieved this image right here. So now let's move ahead. Now the next thing we actually have to achieve is let's achieve this part of our dashboard. Okay. Now we just have to draw the structure, all right, the shapes right here. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So what we have to do is we go over to our shape, okay? Then let's move this here and let's move this here. So I think we need to make that a bit bigger, right? Okay. Now let's compare to the shape we have here. Okay, you can, then this should be wider, right? And it should be moved to this place. Okay, then we can make it smaller a bit. Okay, then we can simply go over to style and let's fill color. Let's make it pink, right? Then we just have to go ahead and turn off border. Okay, so we have to go over to, let's check effects and let's go back to properties. Now let's go back to shape and let's see style. Okay, off. Okay, we have successfully turned up the border. So we can simply copy and paste this, right? We can simply copy and paste this. So let's see how it looks like right here. Okay. You can simply copy and paste this, but let's move this here a bit and let's move this here a bit. Okay, that's looking fair. So we can simply click on both shapes and let's go over to format and let's align sorry, let's control Z that. So let's select the shapes again. Let's go back to format and let's say middle. Okay, and okay, that makes sense. Then we can simply come over here, or let's go over to achieve the text. So we can copy and paste this, and let's move this right here. Okay, so for this text, let's go ahead and turn off the background. Turn off background. Okay, so for this also, let's turn off background. Okay, so this makes sense, right? Now the next thing we have to do is let's go over to click this and let's turn off the background. And we can simply say this should be called number of PCOS pregnant women. PCOS pregnant women. Now remember we mentioned that this health condition actually affects the fertility of women, right? So here we are just trying to calculate a KPI that shows us how many number of women with this condition that we are able to conceive, right? So we can just go over to highlight this and let's go over to say white. Okay. So we can just let's just check this out. Okay. So let's pick this and let's eliminate this. So we can go over to make this smaller, then we can move this up. Right? We can move this up a bit. Okay. So we can highlight, let's make this bold, right? Okay, that makes sense. So let's see what it looks like here. Okay, so I think we just have to make it bigger. So let's make it 11, right? Let's make it 11. And should we make it 12? Make it 12. Okay. Now let's go over to copy and paste this. Copy and paste this text, right? And let's move it here. Okay. And let's call it number of PCOS women exercising regularly. So we say number of PCOS women, right, exercising regularly. Okay, so we can make this bigger, and this makes sense. So let's see. Okay, that makes sense, right? Now the next thing we have to achieve is we just have to achieve the shape here. We can simply just go over here, copy. Okay, let's Ctrl Z that. So we can simply just copy the shape and paste it. Then let's move it over here, and we can simply make this bigger, right? Okay. Then let's check what that looks like. Okay. Okay. So we can simply just come over here and let's change the color of this. Change it to this. Let's see what color was. Okay, I think that color was what was used over there, right? But I would like us to make sure that these are grouped together. So we also group this together. So we can then group these both shapes together. Sorry. So we can group these both shapes together. So we can just easily move them around. So we can just move this right here to the top, right? Then we can move this right here. Okay. Then we can simply click on this tray. Sorry. You can simply click on this. Then we click on this and move it right here. Now the next thing we need to achieve is PCOS women exercise rates. Okay, so we can simply just come here, copy, paste, then we just have to control Z that. Okay, so let's just come here, copy, paste it, copy and paste that, right? So we can move that over here and say PCOS women exercise rates. Okay, now that's looking better. So the next thing we just have to achieve, we can simply just Control Z that please. So we can simply just copy and Control V this, and we can check what we actually have there. Okay, this is looking bigger, so we can simply just make it bigger, right? So we can simply just come here, then copy this one and just group it. Okay. Then the next thing we can do is we can simply just come here, click this, and let's move this up. Sorry, and we are doing it the wrong way. Okay, so we can simply just click on this, then let's click on this and let's move them up a bit. So we can simply just make this a bit bigger, right? Then we can simply just drag it up a bit. So for here, the color can simply be changed to suit the brighter pink. Then we can simply just call this average BMI. So let's say, sorry, Control Z that. So we can come here and Control C and V. Okay. So we can move this over here. Can move this over here and let's say average BMI of women, right? Let's see what we have there. So average BMI of average BMI pregnant. So pregnant is so assuming. So we can simply come over here and make this smaller, right? So we can simply highlight this. I can simply sorry, we can simply highlight this and highlight this. Okay. So we can simply turn this to white, turn this to white. Okay. Then let's eliminate this. Then we can simply come here, copy this and paste it. Right? Copy and paste this. Then let's take this down a bit. Okay. Now the next thing we just have to call this is let's see, average BMI peak patients. Okay. Average BMI peak patients. So let's just say patients. Okay. Then that makes sense. So we can simply sorry, can simply click on this, then let's click on this, let's go back to formats, let's align center. So we can simply then click on the image and let's go over to format and say we want to align to middle. Sorry, Control Z that. So let's just go over to say we want to group this. Okay. Yes. Then the next thing we just have to do is we have to achieve this page. So the next thing we have to do is we have to achieve this particular side of the dashboard. All right. So we just have to bring in the image, right? So to do that, we go over to, sorry, I want to move this a bit. Now to do that, we go over to say we are trying to insert an image, right? Then we go over to say action, or let's go over to say style, then image. So we have successfully brought in the image. So for this image, I generated this image using ChatGPT. Okay. So just in case. So this is what the image looks like, right? So this is actually showing PCOS ovaries, right? As you can see, they have follicles, including the right and the left ovaries, right? So the next thing we can do is we can simply copy and paste this, okay? So let's see what we have here, right? So we can just adjust that accordingly. So let's move it over here, right? So we can simply make it shorter, okay? Sorry, we can simply make it shorter. Then Control Z that, okay? Can simply make it shorter. Right, so let's go back to effects and okay. And this makes sense for now. So we can leave it at that. Now the next thing we have to do is just that by it down. Okay. So we can simply copy this and paste this and let's move this here. Alright, let's move this here. So what if I make this a bit bigger? Okay. Then I can simply copy this and simply come over here to delete this, right? I can simply paste this and let me move this here, okay? So it becomes better this way, right? Now, the next thing we have to do is we have to go over to say number of women with PCOS, right? 175. So we can simply come over here, okay? So copy this and paste this. And let me just control Z that, okay? So let's just come over here, copy and paste this. Then we can simply come over here to say, let's check what we have there. So it's the number of women with PCOS. So we can simply say number of women with the condition, right? Then we can simply highlight this and I want to make this white. Okay, so let me make this, let's make this 12, right? Then we can simply make this smaller. Okay. Now let's make this way. Now I think we can simply let me just make this bigger, right? So it is visible. So because KPIs needs to be bold, so they can be seen at a glance. Okay. Now the next thing we have to do is move this over here. Then we can simply copy and paste this and let's drag this down. And I can simply call this total number of women. So total number of women. Okay. So we can simply highlight this and turn it to Canva. Then this should be 14. Then this should be white. Okay. Now that makes sense, right? Now we have successfully achieved the structure of our dashboard. Now, the next thing we have to do is go ahead and start calculating our KPIs so we can actually start filling in the KPIs correctly. Now, the first KPI I want us to calculate is the total number of women. Now, to calculate the total number of women, what we have to do is go over to say new measure. So we simply say not total, sorry, this should be total women, right? Total women and this should be equals to, we make it of count rows. Okay, count rows. Now we are just simply counting the total patients we have. Okay, the total number of patients we have. So it should be, yes, count rows. Now let's go over to say, okay. Now let's go over to visualize that. To visualize that, we just pick up our card. Then we go over to look for what we just calculated now. So total women, so we drag it to fields. Now this gives us the total women. Now what we simply have to do is go ahead to format this. So we go over to format. So let's go over to general and let's turn off background color. So let's drag it down here, right? Now the next thing we have to do is go back to visual and we go over to visual and for this let's make it white. Okay, white. Okay. Now let's continue. So we also go back to, sorry, we also go back to label. Let's turn that off. So we have successfully calculated the total number of women. Now the next thing we are going to calculate is the number of women that has the condition, right? Now to do that, we go over to our home, okay? Then we go over to new measure. Then let's call this women total women with the condition. Now to do that, we say calculate, right? Then we'll count the entire rows of our data. Okay. And remember that, like I said earlier, that this particular data is encoded. Most of the columns are encoded. Now, this particular place we have PCOS yes/no, right? Where we have 1 is equals to yes, 0 is equals to no. So we are looking for the total number of women with the condition. So we are just looking for the total number of women that says yes, they have those condition. Then we go ahead to OK this. Then the next thing we can do is we can simply come here and copy and paste this. Then let's move this over here. Okay. Then the next thing we can do is we can simply go over here. Okay, so this is the total women with the condition. So we can simply remove this. Then we can simply drag this here. All right, now that gives us that. Okay, now the next thing we have to look for is the number of women, right, with the condition that are pregnant, right? Number of women with the condition that are pregnant. Okay, now we can simply come here, right? Let's come over here. Let's click this and let's copy this. Okay, then we can just remove that. Now to do that, we have to calculate another new measure. So we say, let's just paste what we copied and say, let's just call this women with the condition. Okay, let's just say pregnant women, right? So let's just call this the pregnant women with the condition. Okay, now we are going to just be editing this DAX function a little to suit what we want to do. Now first we are going to be calculating, right, the total number of women that has the condition. Okay, and we are also just going to copy this, then we take this down and we say total number of women that has the condition that are pregnant. So we put a comma here. We say it should be, so we look for pregnant, right? Pregnant. So pregnant, yes, no, right? And we say where pregnant is equals to yes, which is where pregnant is equals to 1. Okay. Now what this DAX function does is it counts the total number of women with the condition, right? And then gives us the total number of women with the condition that are pregnant. Okay, so we can go back to here and say, okay. Okay, it's telling me that choose a different name. Name already exists. Okay, I don't really know why it's saying that. But let's just say number. Okay, maybe I have another tax function that is there already. Let's just say number of pregnant. So you can simply say okay to this, right? Then the same thing we did, we can simply come here, copy and paste. Then let's move this here. Okay. Then we can simply come here. So we can simply come here and let's eliminate this. Then let's move this here. Okay, so this gives us 64, right? So this simply means that we have 64 women with the condition that have successfully gotten pregnant. Now, the next thing we have to calculate is the number of women, right? Number of women with the condition that exercises regularly, right? The same thing, we are just going to be using similar formula to this. So we are just going to tweak this formula a bit to suit what we want to have here. So we can just go over here and let's just copy this, right? Then let's go over here and see new measure. Okay. Then so we say women reg exercise, right? So exercise. Okay, so we just go over here and let's paste this. Okay, so we can just eliminate this, right? Now we are calculating for this, we are simply going to make it exercise, right? Equals to yes or no. So we just look for exercise. Okay, regular exercise equals to yes or no. Then we say one, right? Because we are looking for the total number of women with the condition that exercises regularly. Then we can okay that, right? The same thing, we can copy this and paste this and move it over to here. So what we just have to do is we come over here and drag this to here. Okay, so that gives us 51. Now let's look at this. So we calculated the women with the condition, and we now looked at the ones that exercises regularly, right? So that is it. So we just go ahead and eliminate this. Now it simply means that we have a total of 177 women with the condition, right? And 51 of them exercises regularly and 64 are pregnant, right? Now this will tell us that exercise is actually one of the major things that actually helps women with this condition get pregnant easily, right? So as you can see that out of 64 women that are pregnant, 51 are actually exercising regularly. Now the next thing we actually have to calculate, we actually now have to calculate the PCOS women exercise rates. Now to get that, we just have to divide the women with the condition that exercises regularly, right? And divide it with the number of women that has the condition. Okay, so we just have to go ahead and create a new measure. For this women exercise rates, we are going to be dividing number of number of women with the condition that exercises regularly, right? So let's look at what that is called. So we just have to copy this or we can simply just say okay, then we see what are we dividing it by? We are dividing it with the number of women with the condition. So that's it. We go ahead and okay this, then we can simply go ahead and pick up our card. Okay, so we pick up our card. So this is, we can just make this smaller. Then let's move it here. Then we can simply look for the KPI we just calculated now. All right, this is it, right? So Let's just move this here. For this, I just want us to come here and say sorry, say 0. Okay. Okay. So let's just go ahead and format this. So we turn off this first, then we go over to general and let's just make this turn off the background. Then we can make this white. So we go to over to visual and say colored value should be white. Right? Or we can just say we want it to be black. Okay, so that's better. So it contrasts with the background. So we can just move it there. Now the next thing we just have to calculate is the average body mass index of women or pregnant women with the condition and the average body mass index of the total women with the condition. So let's just go ahead and do that. Now let's just go ahead and calculate the average BMI of the pregnant women with the condition. Now to calculate this, we simply just make use of the average BMI, right? We just write our DAX function. So we calculate just the average BMI. So let's just go ahead and do that and see what it looks like. Remember that we are calculating the average BMI with the women. Sorry, remember that we are calculating the average BMI of women with the condition that are pregnant, right? Not the total women with the condition, right? Now this is the total women with the condition. Now this is the total women with the condition that are pregnant. Now we are simply calculating the average BMI of these women, not the entire women that has the condition. So we say average BMI of, now this should be equals to, we calculate the average of the BMI, right, of the woman who that has the condition, right? Then we then check for the ones that are pregnant, right? So we are just looking for the average BMI of the women with the condition that are pregnant, right? So this is what we are looking at. So now, now this is the DAX function, okay? So remember that we are calculating the average body mass index of the woman that has the condition and that are pregnant, right? So we are calculating the average body mass index of women with the condition that are pregnant, okay? So not women with the condition only. So we are looking for women with the condition that are pregnant, right? So let's go ahead. So we simply go ahead to visualize this, okay? So we simply just pick our card, okay? Then we drag our measure, okay? Then we can go over to start. So let's turn off the background. Think that's it, right? So we can simply make this smaller and we can turn this to white. Okay. Now let's move ahead. Now the next thing we have to calculate, okay? Next thing we just have to control Z that. Okay. So the next thing we have to calculate is the average BMI of the entire patient, right? Now remember here, we calculated the average BMI of the women with the condition that are pregnant. But here we are looking at the entire BMI of this woman, right? Now, here we calculated for this woman, but here we are calculating for this woman. Okay. Now we can simply use the same DAX function that we use, but we just have to eliminate just one line. Now, to do that, we simply go to new measure. Then we can call this average BMI of women with the condition. So we eliminate the pregnant, right? Over here, we can just come here and also eliminate the pregnant. Okay. So this simply means that for here now, we are just calculating the average BMI of this woman, right? The average BMI of the total woman that has the condition. Okay. So we just go ahead and okay that. So we just have to eliminate this. Okay. So let's go ahead and okay that again. Now, the next thing we can do is we can simply come here, copy this and paste it. Then let's move this down here. Okay. Then we can simply eliminate this from here. Then let's look for average BMI of the entire woman with the condition. Okay. So you can see that the average BMI of the entire woman with the condition is slightly higher with the woman with the condition that is actually pregnant. Okay, now this tells us something. So what is this telling us? It simply means that for a woman with this condition to successfully get pregnant, right, they actually have to reduce their BMI level. Okay, they have to reduce their body mass index. Okay, now this can simply tell us that not all the women with this condition are overweight, right? However, for those that are actually overweight, a slight decrease in their BMI level can actually help them to can actually increase their chances of getting pregnant, right? So we can just simply go over here and arrange this a bit. So we can go over to format and let's centralize it. Okay. So I think that looks good, right? Now we have successfully completed this project. So welcome to the end of this tutorial. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, kindly do well to subscribe to my YouTube channel and don't forget to leave a comment. Do you think there is something we did not do right during the tutorial? Do you think there is a DAX function that is incorrect or a step that we missed or something we could have actually done better? So don't forget to leave a comment in the comment section. And also don't forget to like and share. Again, thank you 1000 plus YouTube family.